Knowing your worth comes with understanding who you are. Knowing your worth comes with understanding what your weight is in this society. Because if you're just walking around not knowing what your worth is, anybody can just come into your life and start manipulating things and setting things into places where you might not align with, just because you don't know what your worth is. Knowing your worth is so important, and most of the time it's actually overlooked because we think, oh, we're getting better. But just because you're making something better does not mean that you know its worth. See, if iPhones were getting cheaper, it wouldn't actually make sense because upgrade means upscale. The better a thing gets, the more expensive it should get. We should actually be able to use that same analogy in our daily lives. The more you improve yourself, the more you become better, the more you actively work on yourself, you should realize that your worth becomes more. And unfortunately, that is something that we all fail to realize. And I came to this understanding of myself when I went through certain situations. I had to take a step back and realize that I didn't know my worth. I didn't know what my worth was. Because if I knew what my worth was, I wouldn't have put myself in certain circumstances. And that was a hard pill to swallow because for all this while, I thought, hey, I know what my worth is. But if you know your worth, then why would you deal with certain people and why would you allow certain people to put you through certain things? And I had to understand that of myself to build myself. It's a really hard pill to swallow to tell yourself, I haven't actually realized what my worth is. So that's why it's so important to realize what your worth is. Because if you don't know what your worth is, then anybody can put a price tag on you. And you might not like the price. You might not like the transaction that they're giving to you. So let's talk about how you get to know your worth. Your worth comes from knowing who you are. And it doesn't really stop there. See, just because you know who you are doesn't mean you know your worth. Because knowing who you are, knowing what your values are, is the first base. You have to take it a step further to understanding that these are my values, these are my principles, and they hold weight. And that's when you actually start to know start to know what your worth is. Because you have a lot of people who have values, but anybody can come in their life and take those values away. For example, personally, I don't eat McDonald's. Not because I don't like it, but it doesn't align with my goals. If I want to treat myself to a fast food, I might go to Five Guys, or I haven't been to Five Guys in a while. It's been a while, but I just don't like how food is treated at McDonald's, and I wouldn't want to put that in my body. Now, if somebody should come into my life and they love McDonald's, right, and which is not, there's nothing wrong with that. But if they should come into my life and be able to convince me to go eat McDonald's, then I'm taking myself out of my values. Then I'm out of alignment with what my values are, which is I don't eat McDonald's, right? And that can be compared to a whole lot of situations. There's times where we've promised ourselves not to do certain things, but because those values don't hold enough weight, because we have not placed enough conviction in those values, anybody can come into our life and just dismiss those. And that's when you should realize that you don't really know what your worth is. Because if you knew what your worth is and you knew what your values are and you knew what your principles are, you should not be able to bend those for people, right? Just to make them happy. And that doesn't take away from the fact that sometimes you have to adjust yourself a little bit. There's nothing wrong with that. When you're with someone, it might take a little bit of compromising from both ends. But you have to know what your non-negotiables are. And this can also be applied to other areas of your life, not just relationships when it comes to work. What work are you willing to do? Where do you see yourself? What type of standard do you place on yourself? So the next step from knowing who you are and knowing what your values are and knowing what type of weight your values have, next step is understanding that everybody might not like you, and that's okay. You should not want everybody to like you. You should not want to be everybody's friend. You should aim to be friendly towards everybody, but there's no point in trying to be everybody's friend because not everybody might like you as a friend. I don't like certain things. So it makes sense that if I don't like what other people like, they might not want to be friends with me. Now, if I do not know what my worth is, then I'll want to bend myself to please others. And that's something you should not do. Don't bend what your worth is. Don't compromise your worth for somebody else's emotional budget. Don't do that, because you trying to please them will end up draining you, will end up in you losing yourself. Because if they're not willing to come into your world and learn from you, what makes you want to please them? I feel like as humans, we should be able to meet in the middle. That is my belief. I love the people around me because they're able to meet me in the middle and see from my perspective, and I see from theirs. And that's what makes us a community. That's what makes us commune with each other. So that's another thing. Don't try to please everybody, because not everybody might like you. You should be okay with that. Everybody's in your friend. And that's one thing that my mom told me at a very young age. Not everybody's your friend. And I didn't understand it when I was young. But growing up, I realized that that's the truth. Not everybody's your friend, and you should be okay with that. So to wrap up this conversation, it was really on my mind for a long time, and I feel like as people, we should really, really learn to know our worth. When you know your worth, you know exactly what you tolerate and you know exactly what you do not tolerate. Not knowing your worth might cost you a whole lot than you think. So the earlier you realize what your worth is, the earlier you stop compromising the wrong things. Because compromising the wrong things will end you up in situations that you never ever want to be in. And that's a huge lesson that we all have to learn as early as possible. Thank you guys for listening to this conversation. I'll see you guys in the next video. It's me, your boy Oscar. Subscribe if you haven't. Peace.